Attends, quoi? Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
On va monter pour écouter.
On va monter pour écouter.
C'était la première prise qui tenait à peu près la route bien. Donc on va monter pour voir ce qu'on peut corriger.
Mais ce qu'on est en train de faire en fait, c'est le métier qui est en train de disparaître. C'est le métier du session.
Ouais.
Du session?
Le musicien en session. Il arrive, il ne connaît pas le morceau, voilà.
Ouais, on lui donne un truc.
On lui donne un truc, on lui donne une, tu vois, une couleur et puis.
Ouais. Et c'est en train de partir à cause des home studios dont je fais partie. Donc je vole le propre métier que je fais parfois. C'est plutôt bipolaire comme.
Et pourquoi il disparaît? J'ai pas compris.
Parce que ça coûte beaucoup d'argent et que maintenant tout le monde produit tout chez soi et tout le monde fait tous les instruments tout seul. Et c'est pas grave si ça sonne pas pro et c'est un métier qui est en train de partir.
C'est en train de disparaître. Bah avant, si tu veux, chaque label avait son équipe de session. Donc il y en a des très connus, le Wrecking Crew. C'était donc voilà, mais toute une équipe quoi. On les appelait Motown. Ils avaient aussi il y avait tout le monde quoi. Ils avaient leur équipe attitrée avec les cuivres, section rythmique, tout le monde voilà. Donc hop, coup de fil, puis réunissez en studio et hop, ils recordent en une journée.
Sometimes I messed up with the clip.
They're aware that, you know, a lot of things didn't work here and that's why we're in this situation. I'm also going to try to contact the James guy, but here's the thing is we don't have the studio past 6 tomorrow because there's another band practicing at 7. This is our only chance to keep working. So right now I'm focusing on Oedipus Rex and Death Dream. And honestly, I'd say I'm equally excited because they're different with the same kind of like vibe of a kind of a dark, swampy, doomy feel. Over and over?
Yeah, not necessarily over and over, but I just at least want to have an idea in my head of what I'm going to do.
All right,
because,
loop it.
Like, yeah.
Loop it then.
Like Oedipus Rex, yeah?
Yep.
Crazy feedback, mad effect thing.
Said, look
See what
around.
happens. You might go with your deaf, but it's rock and roll, innit?
That's what I was.
Les Paul, Bill Marshall stack, huh?
You know me.
In Nashville and New York, that a lot of the time you find people who are in a lot of projects but not really invested in any of them. And this is truly, I think, the first time that I've been in a band that's entirely made up of my best friends. A big peak of just me screaming, and then you join the... Now.
Okay, but I don't know what to do. Like I know where it is, but how can I make it musical?
Just keep stopping. Just the stop, the suspension,
okay,
the start. You're a landmine on a loading. Okay.
I got it. I'm good.
Bon, moi j'ai pas toutes les parties. Hein.
C'est pour ça que je vais te.
Tu vois, il y a des trucs, je sais pas ce que je vais faire, tu vois.
Without any preparation.
I know, literally, she's been fucking off all day and now she finds something to do. It's like talking to strangers all day and then on the spot she's got a killer bass line. Here she.
Ce qui est trop bien, c'est qu'il y a une demi-heure, j'étais par terre en haut et j'avais envie de crever parce que je me disais mais merde, je vois vraiment pas ce que je peux faire. Je vais y arriver forcément à un moment, mais c'est dans ces moments-là où tu te dis putain, j'ai envie de laisser tout le monde parler et moi je suis vrai. Et là, je suis juste comme Mimi face à un petit truc qui me plaît et là je suis... C'est dingue. Je trouve ça génial.
Mais c'est bien quand on te donne une couleur, une ambiance, une couleur. Elle nous a fait écouter quelques morceaux, du galop. Du coup, ça te met dans une ambiance mentale.
C'est le refrain, c'est que le refrain.
He's got his sunglasses, he's got his beer, he's fine.
He sounded really good.
Bah en fait, je suis en train de réaliser le rêve que j'avais quand j'avais 13 ans, 14 ans, tu vois. Et aussi, je suis en train de... Tout ce que j'ai fait en commençant la guitare, tu vois, depuis mes 13 ans, de jouer pratiquement tous les jours, de m'entraîner, c'est pour ça que je le fais en fait, c'est pour ce moment-là.
Trop bien.
And we're live, streaming from the shadows of New York City. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm. We're delighted you can join us for our unique podcast community where we explore the issues and challenges in the musical world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Like and share our videos, and remember, you can chat questions of our guests in the chat box. We love it when our guests participate. It makes the conversation so much more interesting. We have a wonderful guest today, a rock singer, songwriter, opera singer, poet, performance artist, rock torchbearer, originally from Florida with roots also in Nashville and also in Europe. We have Miss Kim Logan. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
So glad we could figure this out. I know we had some technical issues, but we're so glad you're here. Where are you calling us from?
I am in Haute-Normandie, Upper Normandy in France, and in my friend's country house.
Beautiful.
And in this amazing kitchen.
What's the state of COVID in these days in France? What's the how is Europe in general doing, but how's France?
France is slow. France is a little slow. The UK was doing really well with their vaccination program and doing really well with a lot of restrictions lifting before I left to come here, but there's definitely some delays that have just happened because of Brexit also happening. There's just been not great weather. It snowed like it hasn't snowed in a decade this winter in the UK. It's just been a kind of a perfect storm of stuff that
perfect for this year, right?
The States seems to be getting the vaccinations happening quicker and some more musical and cultural things happening quicker, but I think that's just because of when lockdowns happened and when they didn't. And unfortunately, Paris is, well, most of France is completely locked down right now. So we're out in the country. We have been for a couple weeks trying to be creative away from the weird shutdown city vibe.
It's good to be out there, kind of apart a little bit. Probably a great time to get some work done. And I'm sure we've interviewed 125 shows. We've interviewed artists of so many different sorts, and people are finding such interesting ways to be creative in this time period. Have you guys found a lot of time for songwriting and like editing?
Definitely. I was separated from my band for a year, which is really crazy because since 2013, I've been touring, and since 2017, when I left Nashville Opera, I've been touring exclusively. So it's been almost 2 years straight of touring when everything sort of stopped at once. So it's not my usual flow, but since I was apart from the band for a year, I came back to them with like 7 songs, and that's a
Wow.
lot for me. It takes me
It's a
a
lot
long
for
time
anybody.
to write
It's
stuff
an
and
entire
think-
album, right? That's like an entire
Yes.
album's worth of music material.
Close, not quite. Yeah, we need a few more things, but that's going to be LP3.
Wow. So you mentioned that you just threw in there that you were working with Nashville Opera. So how does one go from the opera career into the rock career?
They sort of always wrote alongside each other, and I think that that's why I was able to get as far as I did as a young singer doing both. It's very hard to do. And when I was 9 years old, I started singing with the Sarasota Opera in Florida. And I was in the Sarasota Youth Opera for 7 years. And opera was really my first job. It was really my first professional singing gig. And it was really intensive. Like, that was my life. And then around 18, I went to Berkeley for a couple years and was on campus in Boston. This was before Berkeley merged with Boston Conservatory, but they were in an agreement at the time called the Professional Arts Consortium with a bunch of other schools, so that I was able to be dual enrolled at Berkeley for songwriting and contemporary vocal performance, but I also had a classical teacher from Boston Conservatory. So I wasn't really I think I did like Lori in Oklahoma or something in college at Berkeley, but I really wasn't in productions the same way. But then when I moved to Nashville, after only 2 years at Berkeley, it just so happened that Stuart Holt, one of my first mentors ever, he had been the director of the youth opera program while I was in Nashville, or I'm sorry, in Sarasota growing up. And we'd even gone to Tuscany together on a tour that the Sarasota Youth Opera had done of Pisa and Lucca. But Stuart, by the time I had made it to Nashville Opera, was the director of education there. So I was able to audition and be there from like age 19 to 26 when I left to do touring full time, because I was in 2017 I was in Giovanni like all within the span of 6 months as some touring, and it kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm in my late 20s. If I'm not going to throw myself completely into opera, let's throw myself into touring. And then they say when you're growing up in opera that you, as a woman, I suppose, don't reach vocal maturity until 28 to 32. So I think I always had it like in the back of my mind for, I'll do some good hard touring years and then I'll back to my voice is when I'm starting to feel like it's settling.
It's interesting. Yeah, men are even later than that. Tenors generally tend to be 40s. The opera career is a long one, and it's certainly a marathon, right? And so you grew up always singing out between the two and kind of doing both?
Yeah, as long as I could. I was professionally with Sarasota Opera all the way through, my Nashville Opera time. It was 17 years of just managing it as I could. And I got about as far as covering some roles because I was never really able to put myself into the business of opera as much as I was really involved and have always been with the business of my own records. So sort of doing the audition circuit and putting myself out there in a more systematic way that is integrated with the existing way that opera works is challenging because it's just the schedule doesn't make sense. So my most advanced work, I suppose, that I've done was being able to cover certain arias or roles, small things like Fresquita and Carmen or something like that.
That's
but
a wonderful
that would
role.
give me a little bit more stamina, yeah. And now that I'm getting to this age, I'm like, okay, I really do want to get back into it, and I want to learn the full roles that I've only got the bits and pieces of, and find a way to, especially at this very interesting time, come back into opera with something to say or something to, make better about it. We're all going to have to come back thinking of things differently now, so
absolutely. The artist pivot this year has been incredible. So how does the classical background that you have so much experience in, how does that affect your songwriting and your performing in the rock field?
It certainly affects my singing. It's been able to give me the foundation that I need to not hurt myself and always be playing with my voice, keeping myself on my toes by returning to my classical roots and training, and by always singing correctly the way that it was beaten into me to do for the first, like, 10 years of my professional career. I'm able to kind of experiment and try things and know that I'm not gonna ruin my voice or hurt myself. So it's my education and my safety net for sure. But as far as my songwriting goes, that's kind of like my lifetime battle, because it's this way of wanting to reflect that. I think it naturally comes out in the aesthetic of my music and in the themes maybe, but I don't want I want to avoid the rock opera cliche, because I'm not trying to make a Queen album. I'm not trying to make Tommy by the Who. I'm really trying to somehow incorporate the parts of classical music that I'm the most inspired by, namely like medieval and early music, and then hardcore romantic like Puccini, Verdi motifs and things like that, into the larger picture of a rock album, or just an album that millennials or Gen Z would listen to without making it cheesy or too self-referential or like derivative of something that's already happened, trying to modernize opera. It's something that I think I'm really looking forward to in my 30s, is trying to figure out a way to integrate these two things that it's not easy to do.
It's very exciting. I mean, I've really enjoyed listening to your music and getting to know I love when I go through an artist. I've had a couple months to go through your music, and really there's a lot of very interesting themes, and you have a lot of different vocal styles you choose to use. And from dynamic, almost Nashville inspired songs like Dirty Business to some of your other music, there's so much variety. I really enjoy the depth and the breadth of your songwriting, so I really appreciate what you're doing with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of really what I'm trying to do. I rock and roll and the blues and country and jazz and everything comes from one place. And I remember growing up listening to the things that my parents would play me, namely stuff like Bonnie Raitt or the Rolling Stones, where I'd ask my dad, "What genre is this?" And he'd get really excited that I noticed that it was, a lot of different ones. And he'd say, "You can really it's every genre. It's any genre that you want." And we're moving toward that ideologically, I think, in contemporary music. But it's always important to, if you have the diversity, show it. And I couldn't have lived my whole life just writing one type of music. I hate repeating myself even once.
That's exciting, and it's really great that you get to bring all these different chapters of your life and make them come alive in your songs. When you write songs, do the words come first, do the music come first, or does it depend on the specific song?
That really depends. It's kind of almost like it's different every time. With my first album, I think it was more traditional. Like, I really tried to sit down, put pen to paper with a guitar, and make it work, make it match. There were a few like really organic moments on that where I would sing something in my head and bring whatever guitar player I was working with at the time, or try to bang it out myself. But a lot of that was like songwritery method, and I can't remember a lot of it. Actually, about 10 years ago, I was starting to write those things. And then my second album was very like patchwork of the songs that I wrote over like a large chunk of time, like 5 or 6 years. And it was really after a long time that the good ones really shone through. I had made earlier recordings of them and then taken them down when the new ones came up. But those were more things I tinkered with. So often the melodies came first, and then I would put like a rudimentary sort of guitar part underneath it, and then bring it to the band as a complete song, but ready for arrangements and parts and production. And now this third album is the first time I've ever experienced truly collaborating with a band on an entire record. I brought things to them over these last couple weeks in Normandy that were fully finished but had no idea what style or arrangement it would be, and I brought things to them that were just bits and pieces of verses and stuff. So it's really could be anything depending upon the topic, the time that I write it, and that's probably what makes it exciting. That's probably why I'm not bored yet.
Oh, you can never get bored, right? Because I'm always fascinated by the process when you come up with the material, you revise the words, the music comes together, and then you bring it to the bandmates, and then you bring it to the studio. Describe the process of how these things can change and how they have their own life in these different processes.
They have many lives. It's like the first life is how it sounds in my bedroom with usually either acoustic guitar or one of my guitars just plugged into a practice amp or something like that. And it's often a slower version of what it will be, or, you know, just a simpler version of what it will be. And that's its first life. And that's when you get the cues of like, is this good or not? Am I singing this back? Did that make me feel the thing that I'm like, ooh, I'm onto something. And then when I bring it to the band, we talk all the time in the Silhouettes about vibe management and vibe control, because we're a band of a lot of different personalities, but we're all best friends, and we get really excited about stuff, and we have so many different ideas, and we also have different tastes in music within this band, which is what makes it so cool. But in bringing these things to them in the last few weeks, I've been sort of having to think about how I'm presenting it before I'm presenting it, especially since there's some change in direction for me involved in this album, especially for me as like one of my like real solo LPs rather than kind of an offshoot project with another group, as I've done with the Hydromatic. But yeah, it's like Tetris. It's like cooking. It's like there's so many analogies that you could put into me with my notebook and like maybe a guitar and then a whole band set up and plugged in, and then one or two of the band members, now we're pushing it into an area where we have beats coming in or synth coming in and joining up with these really heavy rock instruments. And the boys have actually been pushing me to incorporate some of my soprano voice because it's so different from my original music voice. So it's been a family affair this time, that's for sure.
That's exciting because the right artistic collaboration is like it's like taking all this talent, mixing it together, and then the sum is greater than their parts, right? That's really, really exciting. And the next process, when you get into the studio and you have a producer, then it's another X factor, right?
Yeah, we're looking forward to that moment. I love that you said that about the sum being greater than its parts, because that's probably one of the most like spiritual things that I miss about opera, because you get the feeling on stage with a band that you us against the world, this force of like, you know, we're bringing this great thing that's better when we're together, but there's nothing like being on stage with 70 other people, with, you know, 80 other people in the pit, and feeling like there is really something much bigger than you going on here. And there's a bit of a surrender to it that can't happen when you're singing the words that you wrote in front of, you know, a decidedly different crowd of people. But I miss that feeling of being lost in a character and part of something much, much bigger.
How does performing change the pieces you write? Does, you know, the act of performing in front of the audiences over multiple shows, do you find that changes some of those works, or crystallizes those works as you write them?
Crystallizes for sure. The boys and I were talking about a lot of things this past week about how, as we hammer the details out of a bass line, that my vocal line could change. That if something catches on that's catchier in the guitar and my voice wants to follow it, often as the song develops in the studio or in the rehearsal room, the melody line will change that I've written, and sometimes words, but more often it's just like a melody or a phrasing or inflection thing. And the case happened with my song Better, that the first time we recorded it was out in Texas, and it made this amazing playlist, and it's on Spotify on this, you know, curated playlist, and is coming up on these million streams. But this new recording that we put on the album sounds different, and actually I sing it a bunch differently. Like a bunch of the lyrics are reworked because I was singing it live on the road for like a year and a half between those recordings, and it just naturally changed. So now there's two different versions of that song.
That's exciting because everything changes as the perspective changes, and you give it all that performance life is bound to slightly modify and change a little bit. And that's exciting
It moves
to hear.
toward what your
So what's
ear
it like
to hear? Totally.
That's a great organic process. So what's it like when you hear your works on Spotify after the fact, and through all this process, and what's it like to watch your audience grow? Because you've been doing great. You have a great audience, a monthly listenership, and have really been making a lot of impact on social media. And what's that like to watch your music have a life of its own?
I like separating it from my own life because then I can enjoy watching it have a life of its own. One of the big reasons I've gone so into everything from depth psychology to mysticism since I've started this job or really gotten into this job as a lifestyle in the last 5 years, I suppose, is that you really have to protect your ego and id from the projection of what it becomes outside of you. And once those songs are out of me, they're not, they don't almost have anything to do with me anymore. And that's just something I made and hope you like it kind of thing. But performing makes you reflect on, man, your weaknesses and your resentments and things that you have, because I can stand up in front of thousands of people and sing an opera aria that was written 300 years ago and feel a deep connection to the words and the music that I'm singing, but it's not me up there. It's like my body or it's my voice, but it's not necessarily Kim that's singing this aria to you. It's whatever like divine thing works through us when we sing. But when I'm up on a stage in front of, only 100 or a few hundred people, singing something that I wrote in my bedroom, that's very different. And it can sometimes even drive a wedge between you and the audience, and sometimes make you feel weird about like, why am I doing this? Why are you here? Why am I here? What's going on here? And there's a lot that needs to be broken down there when you're singing like your own music. And I think it's just so visceral to sing, and lyrics are so personal for a lot of songwriters. And the delivery of it is so personal that it definitely makes you think about the difference between singing classically, singing original music, and the difference in the
very interesting perspective. And thank you for sharing that. That's
I love.
Sorry, that's a very, very personal observations. I really appreciate that. I've had a couple singer-songwriters on here, and it's interesting that some of them start out writing really personal stuff, and then they kind of go in a different direction, and they kind of find a different kind of way of writing. Have you noticed that in your writing, or do you always start with the personal? How does it work for you?
Nope. I don't know how else to do it, really. I tried in my Nashville years. I tried the co-write thing. I tried the, set me up with people you think match my vibe kind of thing. And that never worked. It never worked because I don't feel sometimes like I can be honest if I'm compromising. And I don't know whether that's just my astrological makeup or what it is, but I definitely feel like I can't be truthful unless I am not filtering that truth. And so much of the co-writing culture and so much of the like be universal with it culture is about diluting what you're trying to say, and I'm not interested in that. So I actually, as I've gotten older and written, I've just gone deeper, really, because it's love and lust relationships. There's only so much you can say about, I'm traveling the world, isn't that exciting? But this next album that I'm putting out is really about politics and God and the apocalypse and what your friends mean to you and how to be, how to cope as in the human condition. And so many songwriters just keep going when they don't have anything to say anymore, and I don't want to be one of those. So I feel like if I've got to say it, I'm going to say it until I don't have anything to say.
Brave, very brave. I love it. So Yeah, so to find that, you're talking about some such huge topics and such vast kind of human condition stories. How do you
Been a
put
long
that down?
pandemic.
Yeah, and a long pandemic. Okay, so that goes together. That segues nicely. Is how has the pandemic affected your songwriting? I mean, obviously live performances have basically stopped, but how has that affected your songwriting?
It forced me to give myself the space to flesh out songs that I would not have finished so quickly. I'm notorious for having multiple ideas going and having none of them finished. But I had I'd like 2 or 3 really good songs when COVID hit, and I just wasn't sure I was ever gonna like make an album again. I was worried that it wasn't gonna be enough songs, that it wasn't gonna be they weren't gonna fit together. But being locked down in New Hampshire and Scotland really forced me to finish the darn things. And I had, a practice that I don't think I had every day before, which was just pick up the guitar and see what happens. And even if it's you playing the same thing you wrote 4 days ago again, just to make sure it sounds good still, then that's fine. You did it. But out of this last year, those two and like 7, that's probably the most prolific I've been in a year of my songwriting life. I didn't have anything else to do. It forced me to, bang it out, finish it.
Well, that's great to have. The silver lining is that we're going to see such an outpouring of art because everyone's been, But a lot of artists I've had on the show have found it very hard to work. The depression that we've all felt, canceling live performances. I'm a conductor, so I've been through it all too, and maintaining our communities, and then. But some people have been jumping back to work and have never stopped, and everything in between. Have you seen that from your colleagues?
Mm-hmm. Completely. I've seen every point on the spectrum this go around. Everybody's dealing with it in their own way, in their own circumstance, relative to their own situation, and it's very eye-opening as to when something like this hits and unsustainable structures are revealed underneath our lives. It's really shocking sometimes to see the position that the people that you care for, the people that are surrounding you, are put in. Privilege shows and lack shows, and some of us just said these kinds of things, and it has brought me great fulfillment to see my generation of millennials and the Gen Z generation below us using this opportunity to raise dialogue about systemic inequality, especially in the music business where these things still happen and are not talked about even as much as they are in Hollywood or other places of business, other fields. But I think that when you pull back the curtain of who's making it through and who's not, system is at the seat of all of this. And if you didn't have the proper access or education about your mental health, then you're probably going to be battling it right now if you're a creative person. And if you didn't have the same access as your peers to resources or opportunities because of the color of your skin or your gender, then that's probably showing too. And it's really time to address these things for what they are and not beat around them anymore, and start demanding a living wage from Spotify and start demanding education about what it takes to be a self-sustaining creative artist in a post-capitalist nightmare. It's really exposed a lot of weak points in the creative community, and I think that because we're such a resilient bunch that we are and should be, and I hope continue to use it as an opportunity to open healthy conversations and awareness around who's struggling and why. Let's talk about why.
I know I'm well versed in this in the classical world, but I look forward to hearing your insights on the rock world. Classical music being very slow to adapt and is now forced to with the stopping of all performances and the inclusion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all of a sudden we have these voices very, very loud and very suddenly are being incorporated into what's going to be necessary as we move forward. How is the rock industry handling this type of sudden changes?
Not well. It's one of the most misogynistic branches of any entertainment industry that's ever existed. Rock and roll has been whitewashed and gendered and mansplained to everyone since the beginning. So rock and roll specifically, I feel, it's time to be caught with its pants down, because it's really a problem. The fact that there's no women on festivals, there's no women in the booking process. There's a ton of women journalists, but journalists are not supported or respected the way that they once were in music. And it's really also a question of other genders as well, because it's not just us, cis women, queer or not, who are out here trying to change the pervading narrative of white man does rock and roll. There are gender fluid people, non-binary people, people of color in places like Nashville and Atlanta, hotbeds of really terrible turmoil historically, who are now coming forth with some of the best rock and roll that's been made in a long time. And the business side of things is really going to see, I think, a bit of a reckoning that was maybe edged closer to boiling by COVID. And it starts internally, because I think that what I've seen more than anything is we're sick of it. Women are sick of it, and the gays are sick of it. And it's time to sort of take it all back, because it wasn't ever really a white man's invention to begin with. So they really don't deserve to keep it.
Good.
And it's once
the more voices, the better, right? The more voices, the better. And you're right.
Yeah, 100%.
I want to hear these new voices, because rock and roll is all about, it can be all about anger. It can be all about rebelliousness. It's time to let the voices speak out. That gives an interesting point.
Frustration.
Yeah, let the frustration boil. So look at the punk movement. We have such great music born out of this kind of these feelings that can make great music happen.
Mm-hmm.
So being an indie rock artist, back in the old days, I've had a bunch of really fine indie artists on the show, and just I love to talk about this. When the record labels controlled everything, and they would create these plastic images of artists, I think that the indie culture completely destroys that, because what makes an indie artist like yourself so popular is that you're real. And that people who become your fans and follow you, they're expecting they're expecting your music to be real. Do you find that to be the case in the indie scene today?
Sort of. Indie is a complex term just because it came from independent music, but it was actually being reappropriated to mean a sort of a genre, like a subgenre of rock music. And as that business terminology of independent was reappropriated to this genre of sort of white guitar music that has the indie rock, it's definitely taken on a bit of a different presentation. And what a lot of people don't realize from the outside about indie rock is that it's controlled by major label subsidiaries posing as independent labels. And there's a lot of what one could liken to some weird deep state action in the music industry, where things are being packaged and marketed to you as independent, and they are deeply not that. So there's definitely the relatability to artists, and the true message that stands out often does come through the independent artists who have either started their own labels or who are in, maybe they got into a good deal with an independent subsidiary of a major that's allowing them to be true to who they are creatively. But through my years in Nashville and New York and London and Paris, for that matter, I've seen a lot of unsigned bands sign with an indie label and never be truly able to fulfill their potential that they were based upon because of the business decisions that get made based on that record deal that's offered to them. So that's why I started my own label when I was 22, and I've always owned all of my own music and publishing, and I've collaborated with tons of publicists and A&R and distributors and sync and things like that. But as far as the creative direction, it's rare to be really truly independent anymore, and that's why I've never really wanted to do anything but be my own label.
And what are some of the challenges with being your own label? And obviously the reward is that you get to chart your course, and you obviously getting to know you over this time we've been on the interview is you're a fiercely independent, and you have you're very driven. I can just tell that you've got that drive, and that you're gonna express yourself in your way. What are some of the challenges you've had to overcome?
The challenges of a label are just not enough hours in a day, not enough hands on your body. But that's just because I do sort of want to oversee everything myself. And I've had in the last couple of years to outsource some things that just were taking too much time. And that definitely was a challenge, to bring people in that I trust to outsource anything from, just royalty flows to artwork and styling and things like that. But it's rewarding as much as it is challenging, so the challenges don't feel that challenging, I guess. But also it's just natural for me to travel a lot and to move around and feel inspired by different people in different places. So having a lot of hands on deck ends up being nice because of all of these different pockets of people that I've built in Paris or London or New York or Nashville. And it gives me the opportunity to provide experiences or resources, or the rare occasion, cold hard money, to the people who are surrounding me on this team and support me and stuff. So it's challenging, but it's I probably wouldn't have it any other way, because I know what's coming in and what's going out.
Yeah, you mentioned having that team around you. I think that's so important in having a team to support you. I mean, it's a hard journey, and you need people who understand you as an artist, understand you and what you need. And how long? Now, you have multiple bands you do collaborate with regularly. I know you have the band you're working with now in Normandy. Are there other bands and other pockets of musicians you regularly collaborate with?
Yeah, the Silhouettes are in Paris, and they've been my band since 2018, and they're my happy place. They're my favorite, just unity of energy that I've ever worked with. It really is a unit. It's something that I wasn't really able to find in my years in Nashville, because whereas I was in bands with my best friends in Nashville, or these incredible top tier players, it's hard to get like 5 people who all really care for each other, who are all on the same page about stuff. So in Nashville, it was a lot of like hired guns. As great as they were, it was never like a unit. So I don't really collaborate with any of the Nashville people anymore, just because most of them have stayed in Nashville. But I have the Silhouettes in Paris, and then I have the Hydromatic in Florida. And in my hometown, there's an incredible guitar player and former guitar tech for the Allman Brothers, and ran a music shop for a while. His name's James Albritton, and he's the band leader of the Hydromatic, and that's a close unit, sometimes a bit of a revolving door, but close core unit of players in South Florida that they're doing everything from some original music to corporate gigs and beach gigs, and they're just really hardworking musicians down there. And whenever I have kind of my jazz, soul, R&B, 60s stuff going on, I'll turn to the Hydromatic to make that realized in recorded form. And James is kind of our guru for the States guitar-wise, and he often comes and plays in Nashville with me. We'll tour a little bit around the States with Hydromatic. But yeah, Hydromatic and Silhouettes will probably be the 2 projects that I'll continue on the most into the future.
How did you originally make the connections with the European connections, and when did you decide to spend a lot of your time in Europe and make these artistic collaborations?
It started with opera. The summer I turned 16, I was lucky enough to be part of not one but two of these like youth tours. And one of them was England, Scotland, and Wales, and the other one took us through Germany, but we were all in mostly in Tuscany. So, and I was able to see, Germany and France for the first time and a lot of those things that year. And we sang cathedrals and castles and spas, and it was just like for somebody who had been already singing opera for 7 years and very much romanticizing this like Eurocentric beauty ideal, it knocked me over. I was just impressionable and excited to see old things for the first time, really. And it was really from then that I was like, I'm gonna end up here. I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know whether it's gonna be for the rest of my life or what, but I'm gonna end up back here. And I really did. Like Scotland, England, France, just drew me in later when I started feeling kind of unsatisfied with Nashville and also unsatisfied with New York. And I was like, maybe it's America. Maybe I should just leave. So in 2016, the Trump crap was building, and it was July or so that I reached out to a company that was looking for singer-songwriters, and they're called Coalition Talent, and they actually represent a bunch of the singers and songwriters who were also actors on Game of Thrones, because a bunch of them were musicians. But
Wow.
they set me up with a 10-day tour of London, and it was all Soho radio, cafes, pop-ups, and I was 25. I knew very few people in the UK at that time. Some friends I'd gone to college with, and then a friend who was a photographer at the time in Brighton. But I just kind of struck out and did that 10-day tour, acoustic solo. Actually, it was an electric guitar solo, and really saw London. And then I went and played in Oxford and went and just stayed in Paris. And all in that month, August 2016, were all my first shows in both sides of the channel. And I played in Paris, the Pigalle Country Club, which is a like New York City style dive bar, rock and roll dive bar in the middle of the red light district of Pigalle, where like all my greatest friends in Paris hang out. And somebody was sick for their open mic night, and I went in and just like ran the open mic night and played. And my guitar player Martin and his girlfriend at the time saw on Instagram that I would be there, and they walked in and we met. And less than 2 years later, Marta and I had started the band. So it happened. I hoped it would happen, and it happened.
That must be so exciting to watch it gel in front of your eyes and to put each piece together. And has have the personnel maintained pretty similar constitutions? Have been basically the same people?
Pretty similar, yeah. It's been such like to see the right people find each other, because I went from absolutely being the youngest person in every interaction in America. I was young for school, I was young for the Nashville scene, and I was always the baby, and it was kind of frustrating after a while. And Silhouettes are all years younger than me. One is actually, Amar is 6 years young, 5 or 6. Finding them and taking most of them on their first ever tours, bringing them through their first real experience making albums, and taking some of the most talented kids I'd ever met in my life who were otherwise not throwing themselves into something like they wanted to be in Paris, was extremely fulfilling. And the first original lineup, my current drummer was playing guitar, and then Martin and I had like a separate guitar duo, and we just had so many obligations in Paris that we were at first just so busy and in different incarnations of ourselves. But the current Silhouettes lineup that was on Shadowwork, the second LP, still remains. We are all the ones out in Normandy here, kind of meeting up and brainstorming about the next one. So it's a good, and it isn't just the players. It's our sound engineer and some close friends who are in the process as production and auxiliary instruments. It really is like a tight-knit family of 6 or 7 people that make this happen now.
That's so exciting. When do you anticipate the release of the next material? When can people expect to see some of those songs hit the streaming waves and all the ways that music is heard these days?
That will depend on the schedule of the person we would like to album. And I have no information, and I can't say anything at all because I literally don't know. But I'm really hoping to be able to go over to Nashville in the States and bring the whole band with me, either late this year or the top of next year, like January, to record the whole thing. We've got 5 songs demoed and in the like late stage tinkering process, and we have 3 or 4 more to do in July when we all come back to Normandy to do like another chapter 2 of this residency. But then we're hoping to bring the whole Silhouettes over to Nashville to make the records. So I'm hoping for a spring release next year. If I can make it happen sooner, I will. But within the year, we'll see LP number 3.
Fingers crossed. That's very, very exciting. We'll be looking out for that. Yeah. So what advice do you have to young people coming up, young artists coming up today, indie artists, indie rock artists, people who have something to say? What would you say to people coming up now?
2 really important things. The first one, artistically, I would say figure out what makes you special. Figure out what you really like, whether it's a unique voice, whether it's a weird way of playing guitar, whether you write weirdly. It's often the things that people criticize you for in the beginning. It's often things that people point out or try to disparage in the beginning that makes you unique and interesting. And play it up rather than downplay it, because that's the key. And then professionally, I would say stay independent as long as possible, because 9 out of 10 people who want something from you don't care whether you get something back from it or not. And as long as we have the technology and resources that we have these days to stay independent and take control of your music and distribute it yourself, publish it yourself, and get informed and capable help behind you, rather than, you know, people who might be really passionate but they don't really know what they're doing, or people who really know what they're doing but don't have your best interests at heart. It's about finding that unique thing that you have that you might even see as your weakness right now, and then keeping a hold of it until you know how to monetize it, until you know how to grow it and nurture it. Or until you find people who really do trust that you can sort of have help you in that process. But it's never going to be somebody taking it all on for you. It's a hard job.
In the best of times, it's a hard job. In these times, it's even more challenging. Yeah. But creative artists will create, like yourself. You're going to go out there and you're going to create and make beautiful art about these challenges we all face. And I can't wait to see what that's going to look like. How can people find out more about you in particular and your band, and what's upcoming as live performances start coming up again?
Yeah, Kim Logan and Silhouettes, and we're on, I think Facebook is that. I don't run the Facebook anymore. I can't do Facebook, but it's on there. And just Kim Logan everywhere else. It's Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, Deezer, any platform at all. I have a YouTube channel. We're going to be doing the Mondo NYC Virtual Festival in October. I did that in person a few years ago, but this one's going to be a virtual set from the Silhouettes. We're going to record it in Paris, and it's going to stream for the festival. So that'll be cool. And we're hoping to play live in the summer overseas here with the regulations that are allowing us to probably do some outdoor festivals.
Well, it's very exciting to hear that the plans are underway to retake the stage and to come out with new material. I can't wait to see that come to fruition. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. This has been so interesting and great.
Continued success to you and your music. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and like our videos. We love that. Remember, keep music alive.